Well, welcome everyone. President Duque, we've got a sellout crowd. It is such an honor to have you with us. Welcome. Hi, I'm Fred Kemp. I'm President and CEO of the Atlantic Council. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the release of the Adrienne Arsht Latin America Center's US-Colombia Task Force report. President Duque, I almost feel that it was hatched not just by the task force, but in chance meetings we had at a dinner and in a very long flight. And it's been an honor talking to you about many of the dreams and the ideas that are also in this report. And it's an honor to launch these findings by your side. Senators Blunt and Cardin, what a wonderful treat to have both of you here. You've been engaged with this from the beginning, and you've been heroes of this bilateral relationship. Your leadership as co-chairs of the task force, we thank you for that and for your commitment to strengthening this strategic partnership. I'd also like to take a moment to recognize the presence. I think Senator Scott is here. Senator Scott, it's great to have you here. Thank you so much for being here. And other members of the task force. David Bohigian, Acting President and CEO of OPEC, thank you as well for joining us. It's been an honor to have you as part of this. The task force report we are releasing today is fittingly called The Untapped Potential of the US-Colombian Partnership. Its purpose and intentions follow the underlying ethos of the Adrienne Arsht Latin America Center, which has made advancing the US-Colombia relationship one of its top priorities. And it follows the vision of its founder and Atlantic Council Executive Vice Chair, Adrienne Arsht, who has been a longtime champion of Colombia. And also very versatile at the Atlantic Council. A lot of her ideas turn into big game changers. We were just in New York launching the first artist in residence of the Atlantic Council as part of the Adrienne Arsht Rockefeller Foundation Resilience Center, and now pushing ahead the bilateral relationship, one of our most important bilateral relationships in the world. So thank you for your commitment, Adrienne, to Colombia and the region. The task force embraces the core values and mission of the Atlantic Council. It galvanizes U.S. leadership in partnership with allies to find innovative solutions to global challenges. As one of the United States' closest allies in the world, this moment is pivotal to double down with concrete and actionable proposals on how to recognize Colombia's achievements and strengthen bilateral relationship. What's on paper is not what's important, though that's also important. It's how we now execute those recommendations. The timing is critical. Colombia is working to implement a peace accord, and our two countries have incredible opportunities to further commerce and investment through our trade promotion agreement. But Colombia faces major headwinds, including the criminality of the Maduro regime and the influx of massive numbers of Venezuelan migrants and refugees. I thank the President for Colombia's leadership in accelerating a peaceful, democratic transition in Venezuela, also a core priority of the Atlantic Council. Before turning it over to Jason Marsack, our fearless leader of the Center, who will lead a conversation with the senators, I'd like all members of the US-Colombia Task Force, US-Colombia Task Force, to rise just briefly for a round of applause from the audience. Over to you, Jason.
Thanks, Fred. Thank you very much, Fred. I want to now invite to the stage Senator Blunt and Senator Cardin. Please. Senator Blunt, you're in the middle. It's first of all, I want to echo Fred's words and President Duque welcoming you here to the Atlantic Council's Space for the Day, just steps from Capitol Hill. It's a real honor to be joined on stage by both of you, Senator Blunt, Senator Cardin, co-chairs of the task force who have dedicated so much effort and energy to this effort. But you're also both steadfast champions of a bipartisan US-Colombia partnership and the broader significance of these strong regional ties. And I think it's a real privilege for myself, everybody else who's participated in this past task force, to have worked with you in this groundbreaking effort. In addition to serving as our co-chairs, Senator Blunt serves on the Senate Appropriations Committee, among other responsibilities, and Senator Cardin serves as a senior member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. I'm going to start off with a question for both of you regarding the report. As we discussed throughout the task force, Colombia is one of the strongest, most important allies of the United States in the world. U.S. foreign policy toward Colombia is one of the most significant examples of bipartisan consensus and, frankly, bipartisan success. We also owe that success to the unwavering commitment of people like both of you, senators, to you, President Duque, and others in both administrations. This task force report outlines the importance of strengthening the US-Colombia partnership. And my first question is why, in your opinion, is it more important than ever to put forward today, on the heels of world leaders gathering in New York, a new modernized blueprint for the future of the relationship? And then also, in what areas among the many we discussed in the task force is there the greatest untapped opportunity and potential in this relationship? Senator Blunt, I'll start with you.
Well, I would say, and Senator Cardin and I have worked on this together for 20 years now, starting with Plan Colombia, moving to where we are today. Senator Scott, who's here with us, understands Colombia like only a former governor of Florida can, and we're glad to have him as part of our effort in the Senate to continue to move this in the right direction. Clearly, the opportunity with Colombia is mutual. It's obviously an opportunity for them, but also it's a great opportunity for us. I think in this hemisphere, Colombia does a better job than anybody projecting our security values, projecting the way we'd like to see our partners in this hemisphere join together. The same advice given by the United States to many of our neighbors are given by Colombia, is better given by Colombia and better received by Colombia. And, you know, we have had this 20 years of experience now where Colombia is a dramatically different place than it was when I first went 20 years ago. But it's also got some dramatically different new challenges than it had 20 years ago. And President Duque and his government dealing with that is important, and we want to be there as partners in that process. And I think once again, the Congress continues in the appropriations process and in the Foreign Relations Committee to reaffirm that partnership, but I think this report does that as well, Jason.
Thank you, Senator Blunt. Senator Cardin.
Let me just agree with Senator Blunt. It's a pleasure always to work with him on whatever issues, particularly this. And we thank the task force for the work. President Duque, it's wonderful to have you here. We rescued you from New York with all the heads of state. You can relax a little bit more here than you could in New York. Jason, it's a great question. And when I think about the progress that we've made in our partnership over 20 years. Think back 20 years ago, Colombia was close to a failed state. We invested over 20 years about $10 billion. We've gotten back much more than that in economic growth, let alone the other benefits we've had in dealing with regional problems. And I think the United States works best when we look at consequential ways that we can make real differences in relationships. Think back to the Marshall Plan after World War II, made a huge difference in Europe. Think about the PEPFAR program that President Reagan started, made a huge difference in the world in dealing with AIDS. I think the same thing is true in Colombia. It's two countries, I understand that, but it shows that you can really change the projection of your country by working in partnership. So we need now to take it to the next level. There are continuing problems. We recognize that. We know that. We still have the problems with narcotics and drugs. We still have those issues. You still have some armed conflict we have to deal with. You still have the problems of human rights issues. We have new problems. Certainly Venezuela, that was mentioned in the migration issues. We had the problem of China and China's presence in our hemisphere. So we need to take it to the next level because Colombia is a key partner to the United States, not only economically, but from a security point of view. And we have to build on that because the challenges are only going to become more severe in our own hemisphere. And Colombia will work with the United States to preserve the democratic principles and order that we need in our hemisphere for not only our economic future and our security future, but for the good of our entire hemisphere.
as Senator Cardin says, this is one of the key points of this task force, is recognizing the broader role of Colombia. Colombia is important in a bilateral partnership, but also Colombia's relevance and importance throughout the hemisphere and frankly throughout the world as a partner for the United States on a number of different efforts. Senator Blunt, Senator Cardin was mentioning taking the relationship to the next level. And on that, I wanted to ask you, throughout your career, you have advocated for a very strong US-Colombia relationship. I saw that personally when we traveled to Colombia last year and in Cartagena together. You were one of the main champions of the US-Colombia trade promotion agreement, fighting tirelessly for its approval 8 years ago. Why is it important to take the US-Colombia trade relationship, the commercial relationship, to the next level? And how do you, through this task force, believe that we can really realize the commercial and investment potential of the US and Colombia?
Well, I do think that it matters how you relate to people in their economy and your economy. The more we become entwined in a good way in our economic relationships, the stronger our other relationships are going forward. The trading effort, the ability to look at our security partners as economic partners as well, very important. I think many of us had real concerns on the use of 230 tariffs when you're talking about countries that are clearly our security partners, not our security adversaries. And many of us have weighed in with the White House and others on this topic specifically where Colombia is concerned. But we need to do everything we can to build that foundation in the current Colombian economies to help them expand their economy. Ben mentioned the narcotics and problems, the drug problems, the poppy problems, trying to create that fundamental basis to where that begins to reach out and create more economic opportunities through the entire country. But we want to be, we can be, and we should be further economically linked to this country that has maintained a democracy in an area where democracy was hard to maintain for generations now, a big country with a thriving economy and lots of resources. We should be their #1 investor, and we should be the #1 place that Colombian companies want to invest. And I hope we can see that linkage continue to get stronger and stronger and stronger as this relationship grows on all fronts.
Senator Blunt, I saw a lot of heads nodding yes as you were talking, so you have the right crowd here. Senator Cardin, last week you convened along with Senator Rubio a hearing to examine new avenues to expand U.S.-Colombia collaboration. And throughout the hearing, for those who haven't seen it, senators praised your policy, President Duque, of complete solidarity toward Venezuelan migrants and refugees. It's really a model for the world. As you all know, the influx of Venezuelans is placing significant strains on Colombia's economy. Many have called for a more active role of the international community. Our report also calls for the creation of a donors conference to assist Colombia in dealing with the Venezuela regional crisis, among other recommendations. Senator Cardin, what additional steps should the U.S. and the international community do to help Colombia with the assistance that it needs?
Well, Jason, thanks for mentioning that hearing. I know we had an outstanding panel. Can you remind me who the panel witnesses were? Jason, of course, was one of our witnesses. He did an excellent job. To President Duque, to the people of Colombia, thank you for what you've done in regards to saving lives. You saved thousands of lives by allowing those that are at risk to be able to get into your country. That's not always the case, and you have been incredible in the burdens you have undertaken in order to provide the humanitarian needs for those who are escaping the violence in Venezuela. It's had a real toll on your country. There's no question. There's an international responsibility here. And the international community has not stepped up the way it should. And there needs to be a greater response. We do need, I know that you called for it, a donors conference. We do need to bring together the nations to make a commitment that will make this possible for us to deal with the challenges of those who have left the country and are now in Colombia and other surrounding countries. We do need to get that moving. That's one of the things we clearly can do. There's more that we need to do. There's no question about it. Obviously, the Venezuelan situation needs to be resolved. And there's no easy answer to resolving the Venezuelan problem, but we really need to talk to the players in the region and recognize that we're not going to impose a solution. We need to have the people of the region, the stakeholders, come together. And I can tell you that the violence, the amount of criminal elements, the fact that you have now armed conflicts coming back into Colombia, but based in Venezuela, it means that we all need to recognize that Venezuela is having a major impact on Colombia, and we all need to come together to help.
Just thank you very much, Senator Cardin. One last question. Rural development, it's critical to undermining the drug trade and other illicit activities. It's also an essential component of the peace accords. And the report recommends the US-Colombia Partnership implement a multidimensional intervention strategy to disrupt the conditions that favor illegality, poverty, and violence. Our report also talks about the role of the US and Colombian private sectors and civil societies in this strategy. How could the U.S. government play a more significant role in working with President Duque and his government to advance rural prosperity, which is so critical for the country?
Go ahead.
Well, yeah, absolutely. We know the history of the conflict with FARC. We know the areas that they controlled. We know the rural areas. We know the poppy crops that were there. We know that it is a difficult area to control from the point of view of what's happening there. But we also know the only path forward is for economic opportunities in these areas. And we have international financing tools that are available that need to concentrate on rural economic development in Colombia. So I think that has to be a prime focus, not only for the economic growth of the country, but for dealing with controlling the illegal drug activities. So there I would hope that the United States would really focus on dealing with that particular need in the country as a high priority, and I think it would make a major difference.
Thank you. And I think we might hear a little bit of that when David Bohegan, OPIC Acting President and CEO, speaks later today. I want to thank both of you, Senators, for your leadership, your bipartisan leadership on Colombia and the success of that and your work as part of this task force. Before closing, I'd also like to acknowledge Ana Arjona, Camila Hernandez, Andrea Trujillo for their work on this report as well. And again, thank the many task force members here today, Bernie Aronson, Rand Beers, Andres Cadena, Stephen Donahue, Dan Fisk, Bob Gelbar, Maria Claudia Lacouture, Brice McMaster, Arturo Valenzuela, and Simonetta Verde. Thank you, Senator Blunt and Senator Cardin, and the many members of this task force. Now, we only skimmed the surface of this 60-page report in the last 20 minutes, so I encourage you all to read it or at least review the consolidated recommendation chart, which appears in the executive summary of the report. It's now my pleasure to turn the program over to Adrienne Arsht, the founder of the Adrienne Arsht Latin America Center, as well as the founder of the Adrienne Arsht Rockefeller Foundation Resilience Center and Atlantic Council Executive Vice Chair, who will introduce President Duque. Thank you very much.
A new version of musical chairs. Thank you. And thank you, Senators Blunt and Cardin, for all of that you've done to lead this. It always feels good when you know that you have made a difference. Colombia is really special to me. I first went there in 1963. You all can do the math. That's 56 years ago. Most of you in this room were not even alive. So when you talk about Colombia 20 years ago, let me tell you 56 years ago. Magic. And it still is, and we must work to keep it that way. Colombia means so much to me. The roses here are Colombian roses, and if you want to order Colombian roses, you go online, type it in, and big boxes of Colombian roses come. And you can have them in your living room, your office, and help Colombia. I serve Colombian coffee, and of course, we all have avocado toast. But there's much more that comes from your country, culture and friendship, and we support that so deeply. Now, before you come to the stage, I'm going to coordinate everybody because I'd like the two senators to come back up and we will present the official version of the task force to President Duque. I think this is, and, okay. Yes, you're gonna, okay. Where do you want me? All right. Yeah, okay. Let's get this, get everybody seated. And I would say very, very proudly, wearing the Order of San Carlos from your country. It means the world to me.
Thank you so much, Adrienne. Well, good afternoon to all of you. It is a great pleasure for me to be here. Just give me one because 3 is too much. It's a great pleasure for me to be here, and I want to begin by thanking you, Adrienne, for your commitment, your love, your dedication to Colombia. When I said hello to you this afternoon, I said how pleased I was to see you wearing the San Carlos Order, because that order was created by Simón Bolívar to praise men and women that serve our nation or that have worked in favor of our nation. I think you deserve that order every day more than the other because you have done a lot for us. Thank you so much, Adrienne. Fred, thank you so much. It's great to see you again. Thank you for all the coordination efforts that you regularly do, thinking about Colombia and how to make the private sector more effective in Colombia, and how to invite civil society and many actors to think of their bilateral relationship as a strategic relationship for the present and for the future. Thank you so much, Fred. Jason, it's great to see you again. Thank you for hosting us. Thank you for participating actively in this very important report. I also wanted to thank Senator Cardin, Senator Blunt, and obviously Senator Scott, who have been very close friends of Colombia. I see many faces of friends that have done a lot for our country. So I want to say hello to some of you. Arturo, thank you so much. It's great to see you. Stephen. I say hello also to the business leaders from Colombia who are here, members of the panel. And I also want to express my deepest gratitude to Ambassador Whitaker that is here with us. Thank you so much, Ambassador. It's great to see you again. Many, many faces, and I would really want to shake your hands afterwards because we're very thankful. I want to begin my words by saying that the relationship between the United States and Colombia has been strategical over history. And by that I mean that it was in 1822 when President Monroe recognized the state of Colombia. Since that day, the relationship has been strengthened year over year. We still remember the first visit done by a U.S. president, and it was Franklin Roosevelt who visited Colombia as president of the United States for the first time. Then President Kennedy went to Colombia. And then we had the visits of President Reagan. We had the visit of President Bush 41. And during President Clinton, a new stage of the relationship began with Plan Colombia. Yesterday, I was speaking to President Clinton, and I said that the most important thing that happened with Plan Colombia in 1999 and the 2000 was that it was conceived as a bipartisan support, but also as a bicameral support when it comes to the U.S. Congress. That relationship was strengthened. We got military support. We got humanitarian aid at the moment. We got institutional coordination. And later, in the Bush administration, a new stage came in place with the negotiation of the free trade agreement. Then the Obama administration continued those efforts, and they suggested changes that became Peace Colombia. And now with the Trump administration, we have received also strong support that has been motivated by different areas and by different types of projects or by different types of challenges, like the Venezuelan crisis or the Venezuelan migration. But I believe that the most important thing that is happening this afternoon is that this very important panel of experts and people that have worked for Colombia are recommending a new blueprint for the bilateral relationship. And I consider this very important because, in fact, we have to build the relationship thinking on the short, mid, and long term. And that is one of the most important things I see in this report. Because I consider that Peace Colombia was conceived for a period that is no longer the driver of what's taking place in Colombia. And I also believe that the next stage of the relationship should be based on three principles that I see them very well reflected in the report. Legality, the rule of law, that has to do in the way we fight jointly criminal activities, narco trafficking, and how can we build a lasting rule of law throughout the country. Entrepreneurship and trade and science and technology that has also been integrated in the report so that we evaluate how do we open markets, how do we get more investment, how do we have more cross-border actions in order to improve the way we allow more people to access to opportunities, and also how do we face regional challenges. So I value those things from the report. But I want to put this report and their recommendations into a perspective of where does Colombia stand today and where is Colombia heading to. Because Colombia today is a country with a vibrant economy. It is true that in order for us to become a high-income country, we must have sustainable levels of growth that are above 5 or 6%, and especially if we want to become a high-income country in the next 2 decades. But it's also true that Latin America this year is projected to grow around 0.5%, while Colombia is going to be above 3%. Why? Because I think we have taken the right decisions when it comes to taxation policies that have been very well reflected in this report. And that means that we have to be enablers of private sector dynamism. That is because we identified since we took office that we could no longer keep on behaving the way we were before, because every single time there was a tax reform in Colombia, would the state try to spend more, they just sent the check to the private sector. And those are the things we changed in just 1 year in office. We reduced the aggregate taxation rates for companies, small, medium, and large size. And with that, we have been incentivizing more investment. And we can see that just by telling that in the first semester of this year, the economy grew at 3%, but foreign direct investment grew 24%. And at the same time, when doing this with fiscal prudence, because this year, Colombia is going to have, for the first time in 7 years, and for the first time since the fiscal rule was created, a primary fiscal surplus of 0.6% of GDP. And we're doing this hand in hand with the best years of tourism in Colombia, Last year we had the highest amount of non-resident visitors. This year is going to be higher. Last year we saw the highest occupancy rates in hotels in 15 years, and this year the numbers will be higher. We're seeing a transformation in the energy sector, which is also linked to what the report points on science and technology, because we're making a big revolution on non-conventional renewable energies, having the largest percentual expansion of a Latin American country in such a short period, because we're also promoting a telecom bill so that we get 70% of the Colombian people with high-speed internet by 2022. So all those things are happening, and it's a good story to be told. Now, do we have challenges? Yes. Yes. But we have different challenges. And I must say that it's not just for the sake of criticism, but for the sake of evaluation, that Peace Colombia had a major failure. And that was that since 2015 to August 2018, Colombia passed from having less than 60,000 hectares of illegal crops to have more than 200,000 hectares. That's what we inherited, and that's why, since day one, we said we had to face that major challenge. Manual eradication groups had a major reduction. We had more than 100 in the year 2014, or 2010, sorry, and when we assumed office, only 23. So we had to recover the manual eradication groups, and as we said, we're not thinking on a silver bullet. There is a combination, and a broad combination of tools. And that includes substitution, manual eradication, alternative development, but also precision aerial spray when required, under the premise that we cannot let manual eradicators go to places that have landmines or snipers that are paid by cartels that are supporting illegal groups in the country. So we decided to take the right decisions, and for the first time in 7 years, with a lot of effort, we got to stop for the first time the exponential growth and have a reduction. Can we say that we have achieved victory? No, but we are going in the right track. So I value that the report highlights that that is a challenge, that we're up to face the challenge, and that we will prevail, because I think we're taking the right decisions. Now, the report highlights also where is Colombia heading on the peace accords. And this is very important for me to express it in a clear way. This administration does not play politics with peace, but we want to have a peace policy, and we call it peace with legality. And that means that the reincorporation process has to be a success. And we are working for the reincorporation process to be a success. But it also implies that we go to the municipalities that were badly hit by violence with an integral approach from the state. And that's the reason why, when we compared what happened in the 20 previous months of implementation before my oath of office and what has happened in the last year, I think the numbers say it all. There was an American senator that was very famous. His name was Daniel Patrick Moynihan, that used to say that in politics you're entitled to your own opinions, but not to your own facts. So I prefer to speak based on the facts. In the previous 20 months of implementation before my oath of office, there were only 2 collective productive projects approved for the people that were in the process of reincorporation. Today, we have 29. We have made 27 projects possible that are giving opportunities to more than 1,400 members or former combatants of FARC. When we assumed office and we evaluated what had happened in the 20 previous months, we realized that on the regional focused development plans that are the cornerstone of the integral support from the state to the regions that were badly affected by violence, there were only 2 that had been coordinated with communities. Today we have 16. That means in 1 year we had made possible the coordination to build those 14 regional focused development plans. But that's not just about it. There's more things to tell. In 1 year, we have been able to formalize 300,000 hectares. And if you compare that, that's exactly the same amount that was formalized in 20 months of implementation. And we have done a tremendous work hand in hand with USAID, and I want to thank USAID for the support they have given to Colombia, because we have also included 450,000 hectares to the land bank that is going to be titled for communities. And we went to Ovejas Sucre with USAID, and in 13 months, we have the first massive land titling program ever seen in Colombia in a municipality, with a multi-purpose cadastre that has also been included as a state policy, and it will have a very positive impact in communities that were in the past affected by FARC. So all this is happening, and it is happening at the same time where we have called the private sector to enter into the Work for Taxes program. More than $150 million have been provided on works for taxes with the private sector. So I mention all this because the report has put a very important attention on how is the implementation going. Well, I call it peace with legality, and in peace with legality, there are 2 very important principles. On the one hand, full support for those who genuinely want to build the path to legality under the premise of peace, truth, reparation, and non-repetition. But those who want to go back to criminal activities will be faced with all the weight of the law. They will be brought to justice, and we will prevail. And I mention this because there was a lot of criticism, I remember, when many things happened, especially when Jesus Santrich was captured because of an order of a United States federal court that had very substantial probatory material arguing and demonstrating that Jesus Santrich was participating into a conspiration to send 10 tons of cocaine to the United States. Well, he was captured, and there was a statement done by the Colombian Attorney General's office, also by my predecessor. And they said there was contundent evidence. Well, many things happened. There was a lot of criticism, but I believe that what was done was the right thing to do. And in the operation where Santrich was captured, another of his cronies was captured with the name of Marlon Marin, who has been collaborating with U.S. authorities. And he was about to finger point his uncle, Iván Márquez, who was the leader negotiator of the agreement. That's why Iván Márquez left his detail, and he went to anonymity, and then he found safe haven in Venezuela, because he knew he was caught on camera. So all those things happening make me make a very strong reflection. We have to be with the argument of zero tolerance with any form of people that want to go back to criminal activities. And that brings me to the challenge that I know has been included in the blueprint, and it has to do with Venezuela. Because Maduro is a brutal dictator that has provided safe haven and that has sponsored those terrorist organizations in his territory. He's providing them weapons and support. And that is in clear violation of Resolution 1373 that was issued by the United Nations Security Council in 2001 after September 11. That's why this week I said that the behavior that Nicolás Maduro is having with Colombian terrorist groups is only comparable to the behavior of the Taliban regime when they allowed Al-Qaeda members to plot against the United States and the rest of the world in their soil. But I also said that the behavior Nicolas Maduro has had with his people, it's only comparable to the one we saw with Slobodan Milosevic in former Yugoslavia. It's exactly the same type of behavior. And I mention all this because that brutality has triggered the most horrendous migration crisis in Latin America's recent history. I mention this because 4 million people have left Venezuela. 1.4 million are in Colombian soils. We have Venezuelan brothers and sisters in our country. And we have kept the policy of open borders with solidarity and fraternity because we trust more in an orderly and well-managed migration policy based on those principles than just going on the idea of closing the borders and letting the people pass through the trails while the government looks to the other side. We do this because this is the morally right thing to do. Does it create fiscal stress? Yes, it does. It creates fiscal stress. Does it produce impacts in social policy? Yes, it does. But still, we will continue to embrace that cause. And I value that this report, Adrienne, is calling for a donor conference. Because when we look at the size of this crisis, and if we compare the size of this crisis with other migration crises in the world, it is absurd to see the amount of world support to this magnitude of the crisis compared to other countries. And do we need more resources? Yes, but it's not for the Colombian state. It's for the migrants. It's for the people that are coming to our country with frozen bones, lacking of medicine, and dying of hunger. But still, the major thing that we have to achieve is to put an end to the dictatorship in Venezuela. And I mentioned that yesterday. 3 things have to be met: the end of the usurpation and the dictatorship, the confirmation of a transitionary government with the right participation, and the calling for free elections. And I value that the report highlights that Venezuela is a major issue, and it is. But you know what? The most important demonstration of resilience of Colombia is that having one of the major migration crises in the world is that the economy is growing above 3%. We had lost the market of Venezuela that was $7 billion, and today is barely 0. And still the economy is growing above 3%. That demonstrates not only resilience, but the capacity of the Colombian economy to adapt. So those things that I highlighted in the report, we take it seriously. And I just wanted to show to you the dossier that yesterday was shared with the United Nations General Assembly. We gave a copy today to Secretary Gutierrez. We also gave a copy to Secretary Almagro. And these are 128 pages of very well acquired information. Information that demonstrates the amount of kingpins of former FARC dissidents and ELN kingpins in the Venezuelan soil. This report shows the fields where they're training terrorists. It also shows some of the announcements that have made by Venezuelan citizens of the presence of ELN in their territory, the routes that are used for narco-trafficking operations. So this is very important, and dealing with this matter is going to be very important in the bilateral relationship. But if we leave aside those items of the agenda, the other major thing we have to achieve, and it's based in the report, has to do with supporting the closing of social gaps. Colombia is now a member of the OECD with the support of the United States. And we know that when we sit in that very important club of high-income countries, and I look to side, I see countries with income per capita that are above $30,000. Our income per capita is less than $7,000. How long would it take us to get to the high levels of income? 100 years growing at 1%, or 20 years growing above 5 or 6%. So that's where we want to be. We're doing all our efforts to get there. Investment is coming to Colombia. We are deregulating. We're eliminating red tape. We're promoting sectors of aggregated value. And we're also pushing to have a social policy where we can close the gaps, like the one that I just want to share with you, and is that this year we will have 80,000 students from low-income families coming for free to public education. We're also having this year another major achievement. We're going to have more than 150,000 Colombian families that will become owners of their own house. And that is a very important transformation because there will no longer be renters for life. So I just mention all this because I consider this report is aligned to what I really want to build with the United States. And it's to look at a second phase of the bilateral relationship after Plan Colombia. And this is not based on requesting money. It is based on common efforts in security, in entrepreneurship, and in fairness for the Colombian people. So I want to use this very important report as a tool so that the approach that we will have with the U.S. authorities can lead us to celebrate the 20 years of Plan Colombia with a new blueprint looking to 2030. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, thank you very much for those incredibly insightful remarks. As you know, Mr. President, you can count on the full support of the Atlantic Council with the US-Colombia Partnership and Venezuela as well. I'd also like to, as you know, Mr. President, thank the unwavering partnership that we have as well with your Foreign Minister, Carlos Trujillo, we hosted on Monday in New York as part of our Priority Venezuela event, as well as Ambassador Santos here in Washington. It's now my pleasure to introduce David Bohigian, the Acting President and CEO of the U.S. Overseas Private Investment Corporation. As all of you know, OPIC's role, and as of next week, the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation, is to mobilize private sector investment to facilitate economic development. Dave is a champion of Colombia in the region, just recently returned from Colombia, and prior to joining OPIC 2 years ago, he held a number of positions, senior positions in the private sector and also in the Bush administration. Please join me in welcoming David Bohigian.
Well, thank you, Jason. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Mr. President, you're always so inspiring, and that's why we want to invest in you and your country more from the Overseas Private Investment Corporation. The Atlantic Council is such a great partner for the U.S. government. Fred, Adrienne, your graciousness, what you've done as a citizen of the United States and the world goes without saying, but thank you for doing what you do. And for all the distinguished visitors here, the senators and the co-chairs and the task force, thank you for strengthening our relationship with such an important partner. You know, my partnership with Colombia goes back to when I started to work at the Department of Commerce and met a force of nature ambassador, now president of the IDB, Moreno. And we would have coffee in his residence and talk about days like today and strengthening the relationship that we've done. And you know what he and I did this morning at the 60th anniversary of the Inter-American Development Bank? We launched what could be a $10 billion joint venture for the countries of the region. So you know these dreams can come true. And I know that the recommendations in the report are not just dreams. They're things we're all going to work on together for the years ahead. So what we do at the Overseas Private Investment Corporation is to help catalyze private sector capital, as the President was talking about earlier. The economic reforms you're making are going to be able to attract capital from all over the world. And the Overseas Private Investment Corporation, as Jason said, soon to be the new Development Finance Corporation of the United States, stands ready to continue to help. And we've done that recently, as you noted, on a trip with advisor to the President, Ivanka Trump, where we met the President and announced $500 million to support the women of the hemisphere, right? And when you see your cabinet, when you meet your First Lady, when you meet your Vice President, you understand why we're investing in the region of the women, in the women of the region. It's because they promote stability, they promote prosperity, and the ability to invest in their own families create stable communities and stable societies. We also did that through investing in 2 private equity funds that are run by women, and being able to work with them to catalyze entrepreneurs who are some of the world's most engaged citizens who are going to continue to push for reforms in your country. And a wide range of areas in which we work, sectors in which we work, infrastructure and oil fields and mortgages and financial services, and the Rumichaca Pasta toll road that we worked on together. There's so much more we can do together because there's no more effective way to create prosperity than investing in the people. And I know you recognize that in the report and in your remarks today. So I'm absolutely thrilled to read the report and make sure that the Overseas Private Investment Corporation and soon to be the U.S. Development Finance Corporation with expanded tools with bipartisan support throughout the United States Congress and this administration is ensuring that as neighbors, we can build together. So thank you very much for this report, and thank you for your time, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, David. I'd like to again thank President Duque for your incredibly insightful comments and for joining us today. Mr. President, it is a real honor to have released this report with you, and we look forward to working with your administration, the U.S. administration, the U.S. Congress, in advancing the recommendations that will serve to strengthen our mutual ties at this critical moment. Colombia's future, as you know, as your foreign minister ambassador here know, is a core priority of the Atlantic Council and a core priority of the Adrienne Arsht Latin America Center. Thank you again to Senators Blunt and Cardin for their leadership and to the many task force members who are here today for their incredible energy and time that they put into this report. I'd like to thank also my entire team and the Atlantic Council events team, most especially Camilo Hernandez, Valentina Sadar, and Roberta Braga for their tireless work around today's event. Mark September 26 as the beginning of a new chapter of an even deeper US-Colombia relationship. With that, I invite you to the terrace to enjoy the beautiful view of the US Capitol.
Actually, if we could ask people